Remember the Bioshock statement, like the line, "Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow?" That I have used time and time again as the most reductive, but also best way to describe socialist principles. Anyway, I want to make this as productive as possible. For that reason, we are going to move on to a friend of the show, Yugopnik.
To this channel,
his perspective.
hello. I make videos loosely based around the Marxian analysis of the world, and if this sounds scary...
You take shit to get views and make money, we all know this. No. I don't take shit to make views and get money. There are plenty of content creators who don't take any of this shit. I wish that I could be one of those content creators. I am not, because I'm open about my politics. My politics that are very controversial for a lot of people. That's the reason why I take a metric ton of shit in comparison to other content creators who don't. This is a real friend of the show, not a fake one. I take it because there are a lot of people like yourself that come in here just to like argue, and then inevitably they start changing their perspective. Okay? That's it. And that's my goal, is to change your mind. Or at least to have you be a little bit more charitable to a different perspective.
To you, then you're kind of at the right place. I usually make far longer, more in-depth videos on very specific topics and stay away from broad theory analysis. But I felt like these are points so commonly misunderstood that I needed to give my 2 cents on them. Here's hoping it reaches the right people. For analysis, which inspired half of this video, please check out Zoe Baker and Kak Philosophy Now Jonas Cheka's videos, which will be linked below. Rarely who can cold-heartedly say that the way we run the world right now is sustainable or achieves net positive outcomes for the majority of the world's population. If you've looked around or read more than half a BuzzFeed article this year, you know we are living in a real-life example of how the way we have set up the world, defined as capitalism, is incapable of handling crisis. Not because we don't have enough resources, manpower, or will, but because the main thing society is organized around isn't based on human well-being, but profit extraction. Yeah, the cliche criticism of capitalism, so typical, I know. Profit bad, helping people good. So what is it exactly that we left-wingers propose? Is it egalitarian equality of all? A world in which we are all happy with what we have. People are of equal height. Race is literally unnoticeable because we're all colorblind somehow. Everyone lives forever and churches are turned into hospitals. A science fiction universe that would be so unbelievable that no one would even sign off a budget on making a movie around it. Everyone looking the same, dressing the same, eating the same, earning the same, and being given the same, no matter
Great
how
movie.
much work
Equilibrium
they do
is so
or don't
good.
do. Seriously, is that really what people think Marxists want? Do you genuinely believe that modern Marxists,
Yes.
a whole group of people who think everyone around them is missing the bloody point of it all, who consider the liberal and conservative to be as politically literate as a gorilla most of the time, to dream of a world of total unadulterated equality? Let me spoil it for you. They don't.
What?
Good old lobster man.
Wrong. Sorry. He's showing my favorite philosopher. He knows what Marxism is. Yeah. Some people aren't understanding the difference between I don't accept this criticism because it hurts my feelings and I don't accept this criticism because you're criticizing me based on comparing me to a set of facts that are false. They're comparing you to a checklist of socialism facts with the wrong bullet points under the header. Yep. Fire. That's a great take. I'm going to
run in right now and deliver a line only Tommy Wiseau would dream of performing. There you go, they admit to it. They only use rhetoric of equality to set up a society in which they can simply replace the previous elite, the rich, and rule through the iron fists of the party. Well, my benzos-addicted carnivorous crab friend, as lots of Twitter Marxists like to say, please read a fucking book. The proposition of complete equality among everyone is at its core non-materially plausible and therefore non-Marxist.
It's what it is.
Yes.
Egalitarianism's popularity stems from the French revolutionary term liberté, égalité, fraternité, apologies if I butchered that, and it was a term very useful for the time and place in which it was devised. But as material conditions change and develop, and as the newly formed class superstructure grew after the French Revolution, the idea of complete equality became one which lacked universality. What is meant by this is excellently put forward by Marx in a document called The Critique of the Gotha Program. There, a very straightforward but brilliant idea is introduced. Equality can't really be applied to society as a whole, but needs to be looked at on a case-by-case principle. For example, Maria, who has 2 kids, and Ivanka, who has none, receive the same wage. A part of Maria's money will have to be spent on her children, and she would therefore hold less usable exchange value, hold less money, for herself, which would indirectly make Ivanka richer, automatically destroying the very initial reasoning of equality. Here's another example. Should everyone be treated equally during a massive flood where certain parts of town were hit heavier than others? Should the same amount of effort and time be invested?
What's wrong with the world he showed in the beginning? First of all, it's from a movie, and it's like literally shown as bad in the movie. It's not the real world, but if we were to like assume that there could be a real world like that, here is one major criticism of a world like that. Even if it was not in a movie, which by the way, I can't repeat this enough, it is in a movie. Okay? It's not a documentary, it's a movie. Fictional. So, why is that unsustainable? Do you like basketball? Do you enjoy watching sports? Sometimes not having equal outcome for all is good. It's unnatural, not even like making a naturalistic fallacy here, but like it's weird and boring to make sure that all outcomes are the same. Who would watch the NBA if we had a limit to we had a max cap to like how tall someone could be? Why would anybody watch the NBA if that was the case? Do you think that that would be better if that was the case? I use sports as an example because it's like the closest to this perceived meritocracy that is otherwise a lie, but it's like the closest that you can arrive at. I haven't watched it. Okay, you haven't watched the movie. It doesn't matter. Just think it through, though. Do you want to live in a world where every single person, no matter how much they put in, is getting the same outcome? This entire video, by the way, is actually destroying the very notion that like Marxists believe in egalitarian principles. Marxism is not about egalitarianism. It's about getting what you need from the system itself and putting however much you can back into the system itself. Okay? To be fair, a competition of clones would be... Okay.
Invested in saving everyone, or should the ones with the biggest threat to their life be assisted first? As you can see, equality, while useful as a rhetorical ideal, is in its very essence problematic because it is not applicable wholesale, and therefore is not ideologically or materially very useful. When applied to work, it becomes especially problematic. If we equalize how much one earns per hour, then the one who can work longer will inevitably be better off than whoever works less. We might have equalized their hourly wages, but they still end up being unequal. What if we make all the total wages the same? Well, then the one who works more but receives the same will inherently end up with the short end of the stick. This is why Daddy Marx and Engels prefer to concentrate on something far more materially significant, realistic, and generally applicable, known as class. It is by eliminating, or at the very least minimizing, the relationship between the exploiter and the exploited, which exists between owners and workers, that we can come closer to a system in which everyone...
Not a high cap, but a salary cap is a successful model in sport. Wait, a salary cap is not played on the basis of each individual, though. A salary cap is on teams in order to ensure some level of fairness so that one team with more money doesn't fucking outspend other teams so that then like they have one mega team that destroys every other team. Do you think that a salary cap implies that LeBron James is making the same salary as a person that's starting off this fucking year? What? Salary cap also is owner based and owner created, And it's part of the part of the ways that owners who make a lot more in profits than their wage laborers in this regard do, there's a way to pay them less. Literally anti-worker. I mean, I don't even have like an issue with equalizing salaries to a certain degree, for teams, I mean. Okay? But I do think it's ridiculous that, that's like it would be ridiculous to ensure that every single person is getting paid the exact same.
Everyone is playing by the same rules on the same field. I kind of honestly find this ironic and a bit funny because, in a way, Marxists, the very people who are accused of being too utopian with their understanding of so-called human nature, are the ones most critical of it, even though they don't believe in it. The Marxist, through the abolishment of class hierarchy as we know it today, does away with the biggest tools at the disposal of the lazy and ill-meaning to amass great wealth, while the worker, the actual producer of goods and services, suffers. If human nature really is greedy, then shouldn't we try to limit the accessibility humans have to tools that can turn that greed into power? Well, even though for completely different reasons, that's exactly what one could say the left wants. The leveling of the playing field does not mean belief in equality of outcome or equality of opportunity. The latter, while a bit less radical, is unfortunately also an unattainable goal. Even in a non-class society, people will be born with different capabilities in different regions of the world.
It's a nice dream, though, a society where everyone is equal. It could never happen. No, a society where everyone has equal footing is what you're supposed to work towards. Equal material opportunities, like all of their material needs are met. That's the goal. It's not to equalize the outcome of society, okay? That's not what anyone is advocating for. That'd be ridiculous to advocate for that. That's just not how humans operate anyway. No matter what you do, even in a society devoid, for example, of money, there are still going to be other types of hierarchies, socially learned hierarchies that people focus on. That's normal. That's a totally normal thing. Okay?
And under different circumstances, and would therefore never be given true equality of opportunity. Only in a post-organic and post-material scenario can we even possibly begin to imagine something like this, but that is a story for another time. This brings us to our second point, modesty and Marxism. I've been raised by two parents of rather contrasting beliefs in pretty much, everything. And therefore, I was exposed to two very different outlooks towards modesty, one which saw great value in it, while the other rejected it as weakness. They were both right and wrong at the same time. I find that modesty towards actions, feats, and successes is a healthy habit to keep. In contrast, gloating over the smallest thing you've done in your life as if you're a babushka talking about her successful grandson will only attract other insecure people who are much more obsessed with appearing successful, whatever that might mean, than they actually are. Therefore, modesty on its own is pretty great. But unfortunately, nothing stands on its own in a world governed by systems and ideologies. In capitalism, the most common form of modesty is seen as a defense mechanism towards your superiors, be it your government or your boss, and that is very dangerous. What do I mean by this? Let's do a little
This is a great
exercise. Is it really modesty when you accept the fact that you haven't been promoted at the workplace you've been at for the last 5 years? Or is it fear disguised in the socially accepted notion of humility? Is quietly looking at the ground while your boss shit-talks you modesty or fear? Is letting your partner boss you around your home modesty or fear? Is seeing all your work creating wealth for everyone but yourself and accepting that as reality modesty or fear? Tavarishi, there is nothing modest in letting anyone trample all over you, and most of you know this. But why is it that when applied to material wealth, it is only the poor who should be modest? What is this bipolar idea that at the same time we should celebrate the successes of the wealthy while promoting modesty for the worker? I'll tell you what it is: propaganda. Always has been, always will be. Now, I'm not saying that the idea of modesty itself is propaganda, but weaponizing it as some sort of greater social ideal for those who are struggling is just that. The attempt to manufacture consent by telling you there is greatness in suffering, but also, quite maddeningly, that there is also greatness in wealth and comfort. It's exactly in this blend of the religious idea of humility and its incredibly contrasting ideology of capitalist eternal growth that has birthed this weird mess of a self-denouncing culture. Modesty and most other values of that are split in two halves. One which applies to the majority, sit there, be quiet and be thankful, and another to the economic minority, where handouts are given out to the rich on the daily and humility is never considered as an option. Modesty has been co-opted as a lifestyle in which believing you deserve more is seen as amoral and indecent. But as I mentioned previously, the extent to which it is unequally applied throughout the different strata of society is simply baffling. It's through rejecting the current status quo that great ideas have moved our species forward, be it through the rejection of monarchic hierarchies and feudal work, where listening to your king and local lord was the modest, kind thing to do, or religious dogmatism and the patriarchy, where the modesty of a woman was conflated with the obedience and unquestionable servitude at home. It's by rejecting the version of modesty which the current system is trying to sell us on that we can see the material reality which we find ourselves in, which to say in layman terms is pretty shit. So stop taking the boot as if it's some sort of high-end philosophical idea.
That's why people have such a fucking stupid perspective on the inherently satirical approach that that BioShock took to reframing libertarian principles as the with socialist rhetoric. I've said this before, and this is something that like a lot of fucking stupid people love using on the internet. Remember the BioShock statement, like the line, "Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow?" That I have used time and time again. That statement I've used time and time again is the most reductive, but also best way to describe socialist principles. Okay? It is. Except people think that that is inherently a capitalist fucking perspective because the brainwashing is so successful that you think a worker demanding more is actually somehow immodest and wrong and fucked up. It's actually capitalist to do that. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow is inherently a socialist statement. Okay? The entire point behind the entire point behind why libertarians and right-wingers use that is because they use everything that is like economically populist as a means to push their own agendas, which are antithetical. No, says the man in the Kremlin, it belongs to the people. No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. Okay? No gods or kings, only man. And that was, that literally is, now it's also anti-government and taxes. I always felt it was more anarcho-capitalistic rhetoric. Yes, it is anarcho-capitalistic rhetoric. But anarcho-capitalism in and of itself is an inherently unsustainable and oxymoronic ideology because capitalism is an unjustifiable construct. It's built on top of an unjustifiable hierarchy. Anarchism is the abolition of unjustifiable hierarchies. Therefore, the concept in and of itself is basically just selling you capitalism again, repackaged in a more sexy veneer. That's the point I'm making. Also, the rapture literally failed. I hope you understand that when, for example, North Korea calls themselves the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, they're not exactly democratic. They're just calling themselves that. I mean, neither is America, but that's besides the point. I'm just, for the sake of this argument, I'm just explaining something to you. People name themselves not after what they genuinely are, but oftentimes what they consider to be the most marketable. Okay? So understand that. Nazis called themselves National Socialists. Were they actually socialist at all? Fuck no. They killed socialists. It was the first people that they killed. That's it. Just because someone uses certain keywords does not mean that they genuinely abide by those principles or believe those things. In a lot of instances, is just marketing, which is why I brought up the "is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow" as an inherently socialist concept, which people always fucking yell at me about and say is not socialist, because you are wired into thinking that you as a worker asking for more of the value that you've generated is somehow immodest and wrong. Okay? That's it. And to those who are laughing when I said anarchism is sexy, when your worldview is just reactionary garbage, slapping on even the crustiest of ideologies like anarchy will still make it seem a little bit newer. It's a different veneer. Okay? It's a crusty one, but it's still sexier than just, straightforward reactionary conservatism. Okay?
And bite back.
I gotta pee, I'll be back.
There is greatness in modesty, sure, but not in cowardice. Conclusion.
Fucking finally. God damn it.
So, how do these two concepts fit, and why did I bundle them together in the same video? Well, honestly, it's quite simple. It's the two biggest stereotypes of the socialist I could think of, and they both feed off of each other. The image of the socialist or anarchist many have in their heads is of someone who has failed in their pursuit of greatness in capitalism and is therefore trying to pull everyone down to their level, equalizing others in order to selfishly raise themselves up. A petty creature either dreaming of worlds where all are the same, or a quasi-spiritual hack who thinks all should abide by their weird notion of lower self-worth. But as we've seen, that's not as close to the truth as some on the right would like to think. The socialist ideal lays in rejecting the hierarchical injustices of capitalism and rightly calls for the rejection of poverty as some sort of spiritual modest aspiration, while at the same time understanding the material realities which stop us from dreaming of the impossible. Marxists, in their hyperbolic realism, reject being humbled by how we run our world today, while at the same time rejecting to daydream about unachievable futures. It's a mistake for the wealthy to think of leftists as people who want less or are content with less. A mistake that will cost them dearly.